How's it going, folks? Um, we are entering into chapter 7, the ideology of environmental domination. Going to start looking at the role that religion and um, capitalism play in environmental destruction over time. So essentially, the idea of ideology and environmental domination is exploring the origins that view humans with the power of transforming the environment for their own purposes. There are three main pillars, if you want, traditions that provide this ideological rationale for environmental domination. First, Christianity. Second, individualism. And the third is patriarchy. So whenever you're talking religion and capitalism, we're rolling up on Max Weber's work. Weber proposed that ideas about capitalism ultimately stem from Christianity. Consumption, social status, it all really emanated from Christianity. And in an effort to explain this, he created the idea of the Protestant ethic, which emphasized being one of the elect, because for Protestants, only a certain number of souls are actually going to make it into heaven, and you want to be one of those elect, and you could maximize the possibilities of being one of the elect with signs of moral worth. This moral worth tended to lean towards work, rationalization, piety. So you didn't want to be ostentatious. You wanted to be thrifty. And then your savings you could roll over into economic endeavors, which ultimately would turn a profit. And this ultimately lays the foundations for modern day capitalism, and which goes hand in hand with the treadmill of production. And in the end, Protestantism and the Protestant ethic become representative of the spirit of capitalism itself. One of the ways that we know this, or at least have a better understanding of it, is that modern day capitalism was predominantly located in Protestant countries. Lesser developed countries are still the least Protestant. Today, religion no longer dominates and drives modern day capitalism, but it does still differentiate between countries that are wealthy and are not a majority Protestant. What we now know is that it's the economic and technical structures that have been put in place over time that now support capitalism. These structures were not there in the past, and now we have this structure, this infrastructure that is capitalism, that allows capitalism to exist from generation to generation. It's not something that's being invented. It's something that has been with us for a long time and has legal and institutional and organizational standing. Some more parallels between Christianity, science, and technology. These all have religious origins. The development of powered machines, the moldboard plow, and things like that. This was all in reference to how humans, through religion especially, because that's when much of this technology was created, how humans through religion transformed the earth. And over time, we used religion to justify this idea of man becoming the exploiter of nature and standing above nature, not living within nature, a part of nature, but all of a sudden we became the caretaker of the world. It's a garden that we are supposed to cultivate. We are supposed to be in charge of. And Christianity, along with this view of how we interact with the earth, was what we would call anthropocentric, where humans transcend, much like the gods, the natural carrying capacities of the environment. It doesn't change the fact that Christianity is often at odds with science. There's a real good reason for that, and that is the origins of science are, for all practical purposes, a refutation of the truths that religion and the nobility were professing. It was the religious factions and the religious institutions and the kings and the dukes and the queens and all those folks that were the sole creators of what we considered true about the world. And if you wanted to argue against those folks, you would find out that they had power and they could silence you, and they generally did silence you. They generally did it in very violent ways, so everyone else knew not to question the word of God or the word of the king. And science rises up out of this reality, and it uses method and rationality and empirical confirmation. Empiricism itself means that you can use your five senses to experience it. It wasn't something that you could not know the truth about it. You could see it, you could smell it, you could taste it, you could feel it. So science rises up as a check on religion and the nobility, and it gives a voice to anyone who follows its method. So there's always a tension between religion and science, for sure. Christianity is, of course, geographically and ideologically diverse. And we're more aptly to describe ideas that support domination of the environment as underlying philosophies of the Western world, not just Christianity alone. It's the Western way of life that's supportive of domination and transformation of the environment. Try to imagine your modern world, your life in particular, without all of the technology. Think of how much of the earth you use simply to sustain your own life. That would significantly change if the resources that you rely on to carry on your world were to stop flowing towards you. Non-Western philosophies were very different from Western views. We still see this today. Not everybody believes in the ways of the West. Many of the non-Western philosophies have an emphasis on the promotion of egalitarian relationships with the earth, meaning that they have an acceptance of the environment as is. It's not needing to be transformed. It's not needing to be turned into something. It already is something. This allows us to work with nature and not against nature. But, don't be fooled. Asceticism and rationalism are also present in non-Western cultures as well. They're not simply unique to the West. Another one of those pillars we talked about earlier was individualism, or an emphasis on the self over the wider community. This has long been a central dimension of Western ideological traditions. It's the individual that's important, not the community. And this is not how it's always been. This, of course, does not prepare us to recognize how interconnected we are with our wider surroundings. We can tell ourselves that we are apart from nature, that we are above nature, but that does not make it so. If we create an environmental catastrophe that wipes us off the earth will continue on, with or without us. So, not understanding our interconnected nature might be, in the end, our ultimate downfall. Of course, it tends to ignore consequences of our actions for our wider surroundings and often ourselves. Biological community after biological community after biological community is in decline or has been decimated, yet we continue to move on without thinking how this might impact us over the long haul. And we need to understand that there's an emphasis on self, especially in reference to competitive and hierarchical structures within our society. How do you rise up? And if you do rise up, it might be at the expense of someone else. Individualism also works on the body. This perspective encourages us to see our body as sealed off from the natural world. This creates this idea that bodily functions are somehow vulgar or repulsive or dirty. I've been taught since I was a young person that farting and spitting and burping were bad, but they're natural. And we really have to come to understand that it's our body that's the main medium for how we are connected to the environment in and of itself.